Hi, everybody. Welcome to the December 12th edition of Colorado Inside Out and the very first episode of our 23rd season. Thank you very much for making all of our 23 seasons possible. And let's get to it. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Let's get a quick take on Arapahoe County sending out jury summons to 9,000 citizens this week in preparation for the trial of James Holmes. The number of summons set out will set a new Colorado record and will be among the highest in U.S. history. Pat Cahoon from Westward, 9,000 is a lot, but frankly, they may need that many just to find a jury that could do this with an unbiased opinion. What do you think?
Well, certainly 9,000 is a lot, and we can only hope that with 9,000 they managed to send one to Danny Newsom, our colleague, who lives in Arapahoe County. I'm thinking about everyone in Arapahoe County. My parents, I hope, got these. I think 9,000 will be enough. You can understand why they needed to put out a very broad net, because it's impossible not to have heard about this, and maybe slightly less impossible to have not come up with an opinion. But it is going to be tough to find people who aren't dodging it, trying to come up with any excuse to get out of it, and are willing to sit there with an open mind. And it's coming up soon because the judge didn't agree to let the defense postpone it again.
That's very true. David Kopel from the Impens Institute and DU Law School. I guess statistically, they say like 1 in 50 people in Arapahoe County have the chance of getting one of these summons. How long will the process, do you think the process will be of finally getting from these 9,000 summonses to 12 jurors and 12 alternates?
As long as the defense can possibly stretch it out. It doesn't mean 9,000 people are going to sit in the witness box and be given a voir dire by the lawyers. There will be questionnaires that will drastically, probably, narrow how many people proceed to the next step of being potential jurors. You know, for one thing, you'd want jurors who were not personally affected by the murders, and all the other people who were victimized, know somebody was, and all that. So that's, with all those people that Holmes attacked, there's a wide net of victims. So that'll be the first challenge to find jurors not in that zone of damage.
Eric Sonderman, political analyst. I guess for me, I'm a little bit of a cynic on this issue, because if you have all these people, you have to find folks who are going to be unbiased, folks who haven't made an opinion, but then also people who know are going to have to be available for what's going to be probably a pretty long trial. Do you think that, thinking about getting to that group of people, is that going to temper how folks think about this trial?
Well, Dominic, there's no room for cynicism at this table. I thought you had received that memo. But no, I think your point is right. I mean, how do you find people who, A, have that kind of time on their hands, month after month after month, and B, either know so little about this case or know enough about this case but haven't formed any opinion? It gets tough to find a pool. I differ with Patty a little. Patty used the word that this is coming up soon. No, soon would have been about 2 years ago. This is still, 2.5 years or more post the crime. So this is not exactly a swift justice. I can only imagine the doctor's excuses that are being written as we speak across Arapahoe County, for any possible reason while people are looking to avoid this particular burden. I think the real point here, Dominic, is there could have been a plea deal. The district attorney, George Brockler, there was a plea deal that could have been had a year or more ago to make this all go away, to eliminate the need for a trial, and to send James Holmes away for the rest of his natural life in a very unpleasant, uncomfortable kind of place. And George Brockler didn't want that plea deal, and we'll see if that was the right call or not.
Penfield Tate, longtime state lawmaker, attorney with Greenberg Traurig. You're a practicing lawyer. You know all the different ins and outs of this. What do you make of the events we found out this week?
Well, it is going to take a large potential pool of jurors to find someone not who hasn't heard about the case, but who can have an unbiased opinion and serve. I'm a little bit stunned about procedurally how they went about this. I think it would have made more sense to perhaps send out 1,000 notices and see what your pool looks like, and then incrementally send out notices. When you send out 9,000 jury notices, if you're in the first 5 that get called up to be questioned, you can bail, because there 8,500 people behind you and you figure somebody else is going to get selected. So I think just logistically, the way they structured this was not the best way. But this is our American system of justice. I think Eric really hit the key point that we'll be talking about in 2 or 3 weeks, if not sooner. This is a case that cries out for a plea deal, because it is the type of case that is really going to tax the resources of the court system and the patience of citizens in terms of participating in this. Holmes is entitled to a jury trial, but there's a reason why plea bargains are part of the process, and I think this case perfectly illustrates that. We're going to wonder at the end of the day whether having the option to sentence this man to death was worth everything that we're going to be going through now.
Right. Connect for Health, the state's healthcare exchange, has come under heavy criticism. Lawmakers have proposed to expand state oversight of the program due to various problems reported in an audit released this week. Meanwhile, managers and board members of the exchange admitted major problems with payments to Colorado insurance carriers due to tax credit issues. Patty, we didn't get time to talk about Colorado Connect for Health last week, and things bloomed even this week even further. What do you make of all the issues, especially what came out of the audit?
Well, you know, Connect for Health came out of the gate pretty early, looked like it was fairly organized as soon as the Affordable Care Act came. And then last month, we started hearing some of the problems that were coming. The new, more consumer-friendly website wasn't working. People were complaining that they couldn't make that work. That was the first hit that came through. Then you have the problem that that health providers are not being able to be paid. And then this audit, which is really pretty devastating. You look at, out of the $136 million that has come so far into Connect for Health, $32 million, the auditors are saying, are really questionable payments. We have $36,000. This is just a prop like it. $38,000. We know chapstick is important in Colorado, but Connect for Health, as the auditor said, paid that much for chapstick that actually that is against the rules of what you're supposed to spend money for. That there were $2 million in really questionable payments. Why we have a call center in Arizona when presumably, I mean, I guess they could have gone to India, but presumably there are people capable of answering the telephone and answering questions about Colorado's program here in Colorado, and it would have been nice to have kept that money here. We've got big turnover in the management there. Patty Fontenot left last year after being recommended for a big bonus, which she wisely decided not to take. So it looks like some more state oversight of Connect for Health right now would be a good move.
David, the audit was scathing, but there are also the problems that the managers and board members already acknowledged. So, I mean, it seems they have a two-front battle, if you want to put it that way. What do you think they need to address first?
They shouldn't exist would be the core thing. This is an example of when you have a government that is already too big and not doing its core responsibilities well, child protection, mental health, among many examples, and then you take on this huge additional project. The huge additional thing often fails because if you're not doing your core stuff well, you probably shouldn't be taking on a big new project. We also have the problem of reliance on what we now know were the falsehoods and terrible forecasting, so-called, of Jonathan Gruber. According to him, we're supposed to have 470,000 people in the subsidized exchange by 2016. We're currently at 75,000 on that. We're also, according to Gruber, we're going to have 150,000 in the unsubsidized. I mixed it up. 470,000 in one, we've got 75, 150,000 in the other, and we've only got 52,000. So enrollment's coming in way low. Meanwhile, Medicaid, which Governor Hickenlooper expanded without even asking the legislature, was supposed to go from 440,000 enrollees to 700,000. It's actually going to 1.1 million. That is going to blow a gigantic hole in the entire state budget. So the whole project is a catastrophe for the state.
Eric, all this news comes with just a few weeks to go before we start the session officially. I know there's already committee meetings started and things like that, which the movement to make it under state oversight came from. Where do you think state lawmakers need to go with this, and is there impetus more because this is going to be getting the headlines and doesn't seem to be able to be solved anytime soon?
Well, I think there's impetus for that reason, Dominic. I think there's also political impetus. You now have a divided legislature with Republicans, even though only by one vote, with Republicans in control of the state Senate, with them running those committees, a Republican chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee, who I believe will be Kevin Lundberg, who is not lacking in his conservative instincts. So I think the combination of the bad press this has taken and the changed political dynamics at the Capitol are going to bring this in for more and more oversight, more and more scrutiny. And I think the net of that is positive. There ought to be transparency here. There ought to be scrutiny. I'll be curious where the governor comes down and how transparent he wants this to be. Kudos, first of all, I think have to be given to Katie Kerwin-McCrimmon, who's a reporter who has been all over this story for months and months and years, former Rocky Mountain News reporter, but now with Health News Colorado, who I think has just done an A-plus job of covering the Colorado exchange. The real issue is their long-term sustainability. They were awash in all these startup funds. I thought the number was $170 or $180 million of startup funds to get going in year one. They went through almost all of those funds, if not all of those funds. And now they're trying to run maybe a $30 million annual budget without those federal startup funds. So the way they're doing it is putting fees on every insurance policy, not just every insurance policy sold by the exchange, every covered life or every insurance policy in the state of Colorado. So if I buy mine through Aetna and David buys his through Humana or whatever it is, we are paying to subsidize or to finance the exchange. But without that federal subsidy up front, you don't know what the long-term sustainability is.
Penn, at the end of the day, where should the urgency to fix this lie? Is this Governor Hickenlooper's job to fix? Is it the legislature's job to fix? Must they come together and fix this?
I think they have to come together and fix this. And I think probably the greatest disappointment here is the number of lives that are going to be impacted because of these problems with the exchange. It's disappointing deeply because when the Affordable Care Act was passed, Colorado was one of the few states that sort of got together community and business interests and decided to put together an exchange to take control of their own destiny rather than have the feds dictate it. And it looks like it has been woefully lacking in many respects. My hope is that the focus is on coming up with the right remedial measures, analyzing it, and figuring out how to tweak it to move forward, and not focusing on laying blame on past or present management or board and figuring out who is quote unquote responsible for this and going after them. At the end of the day, you've got a charge to do, and even though David thinks the exchange shouldn't exist, you're there, you're empowered, you're funded, get it right. And transparency and accountability clearly is desperately needed here.
Well, speaking of transparency and accountability, let's get to our next topic. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will now oversee the completion of Aurora's VA hospital construction. The project's current contractor, Kiewit Turner, bowed out following a federal board of appeals declaring that the VA failed to uphold its end of the agreement. Meanwhile, Colorado's congressional delegation is working to bring both sides together back to negotiate another deal. David, there's ballooning costs, there's construction companies not working with design firms, VA is messing it all up, and in the meantime, veterans all over Colorado needing this hospital to exist. What's the next best step?
Well, I think when something has gone catastrophically wrong, it is part of the process to fix it and then improve it for the future, is you found out who screwed it up and how. And that's thanks to the Denver Post, which printed via link on its website the full text of the decision by the Civilian Board of Contract Appeals. And the three-judge panel found that the VA itself breached its legal duty of good faith and fair dealing. It's responsible for this disaster. Representative Kaufman has said that maybe the VA shouldn't be in the hospital building business at all, turn it over to the Army Corps of Engineers, which does build stuff and seems to do it reasonably well. This is a core part of the VA. This isn't some optional thing the way Obama's trying to say, oh, let's have the VA solve homelessness. Medical care for people who have war-related injuries is absolutely a responsibility of the federal government. And it's the VA had problems long before Obama, but they've been aggravated by, I think, an attitude that starts right at the top of diffidence about the actual management of the operations of government in an effective way to deliver the services that people are entitled to.
Eric, it already seems that the Colorado delegation working together. You had Mike Hoffman, that's in his district, but Senator Michael Bennet hosted some of the meetings. Is this big enough to get other delegations involved? Can this move up the chain in Congress beyond just the Colorado delegation trying to fix this issue?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if it'll be regarded purely as a Colorado issue and a Colorado problem. I actually think this is symptomatic of something bigger. I read these articles, including the strong report in the Denver Post a day ago, and the question I ask myself is, why is government almost so dysfunctional across the board these days? Name an agency of government. I mean, I wish this was just an outlier. And I wish we could all say, by God, they got to get somebody into the VA who knows how to run that. But, you know, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's our judicial system, whether it's our spy system, which has been obviously a subject of scrutiny this week, run the list. And it is hard to find a branch of government these days where confidence is justified and confidence is merited. And how this thing spun so badly out of control boggles my mind. Yes, cost overruns are not unheard of on major capital construction projects, but a cost overrun of this magnitude, where the project is basically called to a halt, is rather rare. Kudos to Michael Bennet, Mike Kaufman, and others for trying to fix this problem, but it shouldn't have been a problem in the first place. And lastly, I do think you have to at some point start asking the question, the first obligation of government, as we point out, is to our veterans and veterans who were injured in war, served in war, whatever, anyone who served this country. But does it have to be through a captive system? Or are there other ways to provide the medical care that they need without having their own captive system? I don't know, but I think those questions need to start being asked.
Penn, if they came to you for advice, they being Representative Kaufman and Senator Bennet saying, okay, what do we do? How do we fix this? What kind of things do you think they should consider?
Well, clearly, I think, as David pointed out, you know, in order to figure out how to go forward, you really need to understand what went wrong. And so it doesn't matter necessarily whose fault it is, but you've got to figure out, how did this get so far off track? Secondly, I think you've got to know your limitations. If the Army Corps of Engineers builds stuff, you need to let them build stuff. If the VA runs hospitals, they ought to be in the business of running hospital. They ought to talk about what they need physically in the structure of the hospital to run it effectively so they can deliver services to the men and women who walk the wall to keep the rest of us safe, but then they'll let somebody else build it. And clearly there's been a problem here. I think Eric raises an interesting point, and I think over time we're going to see more and more of this, especially with the Affordable Care Act and other policy changes. Is some of these policy changes are going to speak to the need to think differently about how we implement solutions, not only at the federal government level, but the state government level. And so this may be a good example. There are a lot of private companies out there who are expert at building hospitals, and a lot of private firms who are good at building hospitals. Our disconnect historically has been, we've got the infrastructure for a good healthcare system. Just how we finance it and pay for it and provide quality health care for everybody is just completely out of whack. And the VA appears to be part of that same situation.
Patty, wrap it up for us.
Well, it would be nice to think that if the VA just had to worry about running hospitals, they do a good job. But as we've seen in Phoenix and in Grand Junction this year, they've done a tremendous disservice to a lot of the vets who really need them. It is amazing when you think what would happen in a private industry, because there are plenty of hospitals being built right now, if they had an overrun as catastrophic as this. I mean, obviously heads would be rolling, and I think probably soon heads should be rolling here. This has been a project that's been promised for a decade, and the vets deserve it, but no taxpayers deserve to pay the extra amount that we're going to have if and when this facility is ever finished.
As Ferguson-related protests continue in Denver this week, the Denver Police Protective Association is at odds with Mayor Michael Hancock. The union sent a letter claiming that officers have been ordered to not wear military-style protective gear while overseeing protests, allegedly to look less intimidating. The letter from the union outlined their safety concerns for officers, citing the recent car accident at an East High protest. Eric, we've only seen the union letter, so we don't have actual evidence from the order from the police or from the mayor, but this can get sticky. I get the point behind it, but when we're talking about safety and protest, it's never clear cut. What do you think?
It is a balancing act, and as you point out, Dominic, we haven't seen the letter. We've seen the union letter, but we haven't seen if there was an order, and if there was an order, what the content of it was. It's a balancing act. You don't want the police so overly militarized, as we've seen an increasing trend toward, not just in Denver, but across the country. And I'm not just talking about the protective gear that officers wear, but all the military equipment, anti-personnel carriers, what have you, that they've been granted through this program where Pentagon is able to disperse used equipment to police forces around the country. So you don't want to go that direction, but by God, you want cops to be safe and you want them to be protected. And of all the problems out there with our policing these days, some real and some just being hyped these days, I don't know that what police forces are wearing as they supervise protests is at the top of my list. I think the protest down Colfax Avenue a week ago that led to the tragic injury to that one Denver police officer and injuries to 3 others as well, is indicative that those cops were doing a very fine job of managing that situation. So you want to applaud good performance. At the same time, whether it's on Staten Island or elsewhere, you are scratching your head at how that went so badly awry and how there is no consequence for it going awry.
Penn, what do you think?
I step back on a couple initial thoughts. First, I think as residents of Colorado, we ought to be proud in a unique way because we've got a bunch of high school students often engaging in these peaceful protests. And my understanding is with a couple of the protests, the high school students called the Denver Police Department in advance and sort of laid out and said, this is when we're gathering, this is the route for our march, this is what we're going to do, this is when we're finished, so that they knew where to be and where the students would be. And that shows a certain level of responsibility in the exercise of your First Amendment free speech rights that I think we ought to commend these young people for. It's been a long time since we've seen high school students rally about something other than directly impacting their ability to carry iPods or have cell phones in school. I'm a bit disappointed with how the union approached this. I think they have a right to express the concern. I don't think they had to elevate the profile of it by releasing the letter to the press and sort of making a big deal of it. I think the mayor had a good point, given the context and actually given what these protests are about, wanting to de-escalate the appearance of how the Denver Police Department is sort of facilitating the exercise of constitutional rights is important. But the union saying our primary concern is we don't want someone to get hurt. And from what I understand, there were some pretty extenuating circumstances with the car that drove into the crowd and injured the one police officer in terms of a medical condition that needs to be appreciated also. But I think the union is overreaching and posturing just a bit, and particularly given in our community the issues we've had with the Denver Sheriff's Department and the Denver Police Department in excessive force claims, which settlements have now reached record numbers. It may be a bit of an overreach for the union to do this.
Sure. Patty, we're running close on time. What's your quick take?
Well, in the union had also pushed the fact that some students had said F the police. If indeed that's true, that seems like a pretty big side note because for the most part, the students are behaving well. This is not the only tone-deaf thing we're seeing coming out related to the police. We have the tweeting during the Bronco game. I think really right now with all the concern about law enforcement, we don't need to have the DPD's Twitter account telling us what's going on with the Bronco game. We also have the Citizens Oversight Board sent a very stern letter that the response the police sent to the video from the citizen of a cop overreacting, beating someone, this is on a video, and they attacked the witness. We need to kind of chill out a little bit and get professional again.
David, your quick take.
Experience shows that nothing at the Denver Police Department or the Sheriff's Department ever gets fixed unless it's brought out to the media. So the union was right to go to the media. And the fact is, if the officer who was hit in the car accident had been wearing a helmet, he might be in a lot better shape today.
Let's get to our favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. Patty, as always, start us off.
Well, we are seeing it happening right now in Washington. Just the CIA report, some of the incredible things we're hearing. It is a one-sided report, but there's no question that there was some incredible tactics used. And it's an opportunity to think what we really missed hearing from Mark Udall a year ago, a few months ago. He's really stood up. I wish he had stood up and talked like this during his campaign.
David.
So agree with that. And forget the campaign. How about in his entire term in the Senate when he knew a lot of what was going on and had legislative immunity where he could have exposed it on the floor of the Senate?
Eric.
Rolling Stone magazine, and also on a related story, Lena Dunham, the star of Girls and a sort of a cultural icon among young people. Whatever you make of the problem of sexual assault on college campuses, whether it's an epidemic or just something less than that but a serious issue, these false reports or unsubstantiated reports or very questionable journalism do incredible harm to that cause and to that awareness and that public trust.
Penn.
The U.S. Congress, just when you think they get it right, they get it wrong. I mean, I'm glad to see that they funded the government for a full year rather than just for 3 weeks at a time. But to botch the legislation and weigh it down with a partial repeal of some of the financial reforms and to grant a tenfold increase in the level of political contributions seems self-serving at best.
Say something nice. 30 seconds left.
Tomorrow's the anniversary of Claire Davies' death at Arapahoe High School. To her family that's behaved incredibly and the whole Arapahoe High School community, they have really put honor on themselves.
David.
People in Mexico and throughout the Western Hemisphere who are celebrating the Virgin of Guadalupe today as a symbol of transracial unity.
Eric.
Devin Gardner, the quarterback, University of Michigan, that incredible rivalry with Ohio State, and that very touching gesture he did when the opponent's quarterback went down hurt.
To Coloradoans and First Bank for a record performance of another Colorado Gives Day. It just shows that we do invest in our community.
You're here. That's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for tuning in. On behalf of our entire station, echoing what Penn just said, I'd like to thank all of you who participated in Colorado Gives Day and making it a banner day for us. We can't produce shows like this without you, and we're grateful for your support. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks very much for watching. Good night.
My name's Chris Missling, and I do the master control here at Channel 12. I run all the records and tapes for CIO, and I make sure that we're doing our closed captioning and streaming to the web. I always check the slate and make sure it matches the day and episode that we're taping for that day. This is our multi-viewer where I can watch the studio feed plus all of my recorders, and I can just watch all my different feeds all at once, plus the live signal which is going out over the air, which I'm also responsible for. They won't start until I'm rolling.
Thank you, Master Control.
Now we're in the show, and I'm just checking up there to make sure all my recorders are good and that everything looks good. I'm watching my live streaming here. There's going to be a delay, but it looks like it's working.
Hi, I'm Steven, and I'm here behind the scenes for CIO Friday. We are in the server room right now. This is the heartbeat. I don't know if you can hear it. You hear it? No? Okay. If anyone told you that they have the magic, they were wrong. This is where the magic is at, especially Dominic. If he said magic anywhere in his interview thing, that was wrong. Magic is here. So, when Chris, our master control operator, which you just saw, hits record on his computer, the software sends a signal to our video server. This is our video server here. These blues are sexy. So that's how he records our shows here. That's how they record shows coming down from the satellites that they air later. And this is also where CIO plays out when we broadcast it. The other piece of equipment in here that is part of CIO is our switcher. This is our mainframe for the switcher, and if we look behind the switcher, you'll see the cables that feed it. These are all the camera cables down here that feed the switcher. So when the technical director, which was Tyler in our other episode, is hitting buttons, it's communicating to the mainframe and connecting one cable. Like if this was camera 1, it says route camera 1 through all the effects and then go out a different cable that then goes into our Omnion, which is the video server that we just saw. This is our air conditioning units, and I just come in and I just like stay here. I just do this for hours. I actually hug it. It's nice. But only I do that. No one else does that. Don't tell anybody. I shouldn't have done that. Don't put that on camera. This is what we call the blinky light room. If you watch these lights right here, these will start talking to us. You can find the answers to everything in the universe here, but you can't take it out of the room. It's weird. It's frustrating. We have air coming down out of the room that erases your memory.